Boethius said, "I shall omit to speak about genera and species, as to whether they subsist, in the nature of things, or in mere conceptions only, whether also if subsistent, they are bodies or incorporeal, and whether they are separate from, or in, sensibles, and subsist about these, for such a treatise is most profound, and requires another more extensive investigation." Kant said that the human mind comprised two parts, the part which thinks and the part which perceives. Nowadays, we would say that the mind addresses both intelligibles and sensibles, concepts and percepts, universals and particulars. The problem is that sensibles, percepts, particulars, are regarded as real and intelligibles, concepts, universals, as unreal abstractions. In fact, the intelligibles, concepts, universals constitute ultimate reality, as Plato understood. They exist specifically as mathematical sinusoids with a syntax and semantics, not as metaphysical Platonist forms. They are both quantitative and qualitative. Ordinary people have a systemic bias against concepts as real. They can only accept the reality of what presents itself to their sense organs. Nietzsche said that we have no organs for truth. We certainly have no sensory organs for truth. You could observe the world forever and never encounter the truth of reality. Our organ for truth is in fact our intellect, proceeding by way of reason and logic, concepts and universals. But you have to be a genius to understand the reality, the ontology of concepts, of intelligibles. Wikipedia says, Boethius says that a universal, if it were to exist, has to apply to several particulars entirely. He also specifies that they apply simultaneously at once and not in a temporal succession. He reasons that they cannot be mind-independent, i.e., they do not have a real existence, because a quality cannot be both one thing and common to many particulars in such a way that it forms part of a particular's substance, as it would then be partaking of universality and particularity. This type of analysis is fallacious. Here's how reality actually works. There are eternal and necessary things, universals, and they enter into temporal and contingent things, particulars. So, all particulars are necessarily made from universals. They can never be separate from universals. Universals are the building blocks of existence from which everything else is made. The universals are not mind-independent. They are the building blocks of the mind, and thus of everything else. Wikipedia says, however, Boethius also says that universals can't also be of the mind, since a mental construct of a quality is an abstraction and understanding of something outside of the mind. Nothing is outside the mind. The whole of reality is contained within the collection of all minds. So many arguments go wrong because they start with a false assumption, then the consequences of that false assumption inevitably play out. There isn't a world of minds and a separate world of things. Rather, there is a world of minds, and these minds have created a world of things, which exists within the world of minds. To grasp this, just think of dreams. A dream doesn't exist separately from its dreamer. A dream is created by a dreamer, within the mind of the dreamer. The things of the dream are all products of the mind and can't exist without the mind. Exactly the same is true of the real world. It is a creation of all minds, and exists within the collection of all minds, which is why every mind can link to it and influence it. If you have a notion of minds over here and the material world over there, as something completely different, you are inevitably going to get everything wrong. Wikipedia says, Boethius concludes that this representation is either a true understanding of the quality, in which case we revert to the earlier problem faced by those who believe universals are real. Conversely, if the mental abstractions were not a true understanding, then what is understood otherwise than the thing is false. As an example of this argument, consider all red things. Does everything red share in the universal red? Does this universal exist separately from all the particular things that exhibit it? If it does, where is the universal red located, and how does it interact with particulars? If it doesn't, then is red an illusion, some bizarre invention with no precedent in reality, in which case how could it ever be produced? It's therefore, by this way of thinking, not something that exists in particular things, but something we mentally add, rendering it fictitious. But how and why do we add it? So, in this view, either universals are real and inexplicable or unreal and fictions. Neither position is tenable. The actual truth is that all particular things are made of universals, basis sinusoidal waves, which are basis thoughts, and the property of red is, as indicated by the electromagnetic spectrum, the universal spectrum of sinusoids, located at a certain band of the thought spectrum. Any wave function which partakes of waves in this band will consequently exhibit the color red. So, all universals are simply basis thoughts and the properties of basis thoughts. Any particular object, since it is itself made from universals, automatically inherits the properties of its constituent universals. There's no mystery, no puzzle. Particulars are not separate from universals. Particulars are made from universals. They are temporary and contingent local manifestations of eternal and necessary non-local basis functions. All the difficulties regarding universals and particulars stemmed from the notion that universals and particulars were totally different things which then had to be brought into a relation with each other. This separation never actually existed. All along, particulars were made from universals. In ancient Greek atomism, individual atoms served the function of universals. These atoms were then brought into combinations with each other, producing the particular things of the world with their particular properties, all resulting from their constituent atoms, universals. But the atomists did not believe that atoms inherently had any secondary properties. Mi-Kyung Lee wrote, "The primary-secondary quality distinction can be found in ancient Greek philosophers in the form of two distinctions, one between the intrinsic qualities of basic matter and the derivative qualities of composites, and another between appearance and reality." The first ancient Greek thinkers to consider the place of sensible qualities, such as colors and smells in the natural world, were Plato and Democritus. Both draw a kind of distinction between the intrinsic qualities of basic matter and the non-intrinsic qualities of composites and aggregates. Aristotle offers his own version of this kind of distinction, emphasizing that sensible qualities have causal efficacy in their powers to affect perceivers in certain ways. Epicurus went even further in arguing that sensible qualities are relational powers, and like relational powers are real properties of things, not to be dismissed as merely subjective appearances. You can see that Max Tegmark got his key idea about relations between things being the source of properties from Epicurus, the atomist, thus showing that Tegmark never really moved on from the atomist worldview. If atomists cannot locate all the properties of the world in atoms, then they have no choice but to locate the additional properties in relations between atoms. There's nothing else in their system. In ontological mathematics, a system of absolute realism, the secondary, qualitative properties of things are located in the semantic, experiential aspect of sinusoids, while the primary, quantitative properties of things are located in the syntactic, rational aspect of sinusoids. In one view of modern science, the universals are now strings, from which everything else is made. No string theorist ever mentions secondary properties. Wikipedia says, Boethius stated that the mind is able to separate in thought what is not necessarily separable in reality. He cites the human mind's ability to abstract from concrete particulars as an instance of this. This, according to Boethius, avoids the problem of Platonic universals being out there in the real world, but also the problem of them being purely constructs of the mind, in that universals are simply the mind thinking of particulars in an abstract, universal way. His assumption focuses on the problems that language create. Boethius maintained that the structure of language corresponds to the structure of things, and that language creates what he called a philosophical babel of confused and contradictory accounts of the nature of things. These are critical considerations. Man-made language is a man-made falsification of the world. Man-made language is something separate from the physical world, and, even if it is partially successful in making man-made language correspond to the structure of things, it also establishes countless problems mapping man-made language to the real world. It allows the invention of ideas that have no relationship to reality, all the stuff of religion, spiritual systems, speculative philosophies, and so on. The essential point about ontological mathematics is that it is a real language that exists in the real world, as the real world. Hence, in this unique case, there is no separation between reality and language. Man-made language does not exist out there in the real world, it exists inside each individual human mind as a way of interpreting external reality. It is therefore separate from reality. Man-made language reflects two worlds, the actual world, and the man-made interpretation of that world. Here, language and the things they describe are separate. Language, in this man-made context, is not present in things. The things are non-language things, so language can never authentically encapsulate them. New Age guru Alan Watts said, "The menu is not the meal. What we have forgotten is that thoughts and words are conventions, and that it is fatal to take conventions too seriously. A convention is a social convenience, as, for example, money, but it is absurd to take money too seriously, to confuse it with real wealth. In somewhat the same way, thoughts, ideas and words are coins for real things." An enormous amount of mysticism is given over to highlighting how words are not reality, and reality is some ineffable mystery, unreachable by language and by ordinary, language-mediated consciousness, meaning that only some special higher consciousness, taught to you by your local guru, can show you true reality. Watts said, "A scholar tries to learn something every day, a student of Buddhism tries to unlearn something daily. A scholar learns Buddhism so as to demolish every claim of Buddhism. Buddhism is one of the most ridiculous mainstream religions. Buddhists should seek to unlearn Buddhism. That's suitably Zen, right? With ontological mathematics, the things are made of language. There is no separation between language and the world, so the language-based account is identical to the actual account of reality. They are isomorphic. This can't be true in the case of invented languages, but it is automatically true in the case of reality's own language, ontological mathematics. People, whether scientists, Abrahamists or Eastern mystics, are staggeringly resistant to the concept that reality is made of language and thus is intelligible, and has an answer exactly because of this. They want reality to be non-language and thus be beyond the capacity of any language to define it and describe it. They want an inexplicable mystery. Don't be in any doubt, reality has an answer only if it is language. Thankfully, it is language. It is the language of ontological mathematics. Ontological mathematics destroys science, Abrahamism, and Eastern mysticism alike. Ontological mathematics is inherently intelligible, and inherently provides explanations and answers. All of that is built into it, because it's an exact language with an exact syntax, form, structure. It's totally analytic and quantitative. The mystery of existence, such as it is, stems from the fact that mathematics is also qualitative, empirical, subjective, and semantic. To put it another way, a dual-aspect causal system exists, a quantitative, objective one driven by syntax, and a qualitative, subjective one driven by semantics. The two systems are interlinked because they are the two sides of a single coin. Classical science believed only in objective, quantitative causation. There was no means to accommodate subjective decision-making, free will was impossible, and modern science believes in randomness, probabilism, and statistics rather than causation. Again, subjective decision-making, reflecting free will, is impossible. It's remarkable how often human thinkers reach for dualism, totally separating two things, and how rarely they consider a dual aspect monism, making one thing have two aspects, which can make it appear like a dualism when it is in fact an integrated, coherent monism.